Well, it's really expensive to repair a rotting building, isn't it? And if it's to the
Mm.
code, which doesn't require airtightness, you actually don't have a legal remedial pathway either. So if you're a homeowner listening to this, you could be creating a massive problem for yourself that's going to cost you a lot more. And of course, our homes are one of our greatest financial investments we make in our lifetime. So Simon and I want you to get it right. Welcome to the Smart Living Spaces podcast, where we talk about building comfortable, healthy, affordable homes for everyday people. It's architectural design with people and planet in mind. Building for the future, not just for today. So, hi everyone, it's Sharon from Smart Living Spaces, and welcome to this podcast episode. Now, I'm speaking with Simon Cator from Pro Clima, and we'll be talking about airtightness. So, if you're an architectural designer, an architect, or a builder, and you don't know what airtightness is, you've come to the right place. And if you're a homeowner and you're interested in building a healthy and a better home than what's currently available, and you're interested in that sort of stuff, Simon's here to explain that all to you. So, Pro Clima is a company you definitely do want to know about. So welcome, Simon. Thank you for doing this.
Thank you, Sharon. Really great to be here with you today.
Awesome. So let's start right at the beginning, Simon, and assume that somebody who's listening to this has no idea about who you are and who Pro Clima is. Tell me about your role at Pro Clima and what Pro Clima does.
Sure. So Pro Clima is a German company. Our head office is in Germany. I work for the New Zealand operation. I'm the regional sales manager for the Upper North Island. So my role is working with architects, builders, architectural designers, and homeowners, helping them to choose products and ways of construction that will build a home that's going to be comfortable, healthy, energy efficient, and durable over the long period. Now, the way that Pro Clima does it is we offer a range of tapes and membranes, both for external weather tightness as well as internal air tightness.
Awesome. Well, in New Zealand, we know a lot about weather tightness, don't we? Because we had the leaky building crisis. But air
Yeah.
tightness is a sort of a new thing that people are starting to learn about. So give me the 101 on what airtightness is.
Great. So airtightness is unwanted movement of air through the building envelope. And it's important to understand when you have a look at a building what that level is. So we measure that using a tool called the blower door. This is basically a big fan that you would put in one of your external doors of the house, and it would create a pressure on the inside of the building. And the machine would then measure how much air leaks out over the period of an hour. And based off of that, we've got a very good idea how many gaps and cracks there are around your house that are leaking. So basically what we do then is we assist people to develop a system of either membranes or rigid panels on the inside of the insulation layer, which creates this air tightness, which then offers a whole lot of benefits to the performance of the building.
Right. So let's break that down into sort of common understanding, because our building code doesn't currently require airtightness as mandatory. So I have that phrase that says the building code creates the worst performing building legally able to be built, but that's because between 75 and maybe 95 of homes built in New Zealand are built to the only to the mandatory minimums as required into our building code. So a common question that someone might ask is, well, why do we need this air tightness thing? That's great. I don't get unwanted air going through the gaps and cracks in my building envelope. But there are some HRV guys that will say, oh, well, we use the gaps and cracks to ventilate your home and that our walls should breathe. So why do we need this air tightness?
So, Sharon, if we go back a step and we look at houses that were built, say, 50 or 100 years ago, they probably had lots of gaps and cracks. So if you move into an old home, for example, my house, you can look down through the floor and you can actually see gaps in the floor. You know, that's the level of lack of air tightness, if you can put it that way. And when you look at old buildings like that, basically the wind blows and you can actually feel it coming through those gaps and cracks. So those old buildings were really air leaky, or they had a low level of airtightness. And basically any heating that you created inside of the building would just leak out of those gaps and cracks. And you just have to keep pumping in more and more energy. The other concern that we have is that it's not only the air that's leaking out, but there's moisture that's going with that air as well. And as that moisture moves from the inside of the building through the gaps and the cracks, it cools down and it can condense in your walls and your ceiling and cause mold and damage. So we really need to be considerate about airtightness of our buildings.
And we want, we've got joinery that's become more and more airtight. We've got this firmly broken aluminium that's now mandatory as a minimum. So yes, that's certainly something to consider. We don't need breathing buildings, do we? We need to breathe. So now I'm going to ask you, what am I going to ask you? Here we go. Sorry. What happens? So why do we need it? What happens if we don't have it? Do you have some stories about some situations that you have encountered where we haven't had airtightness installed in a home and there has been some issues?
Most certainly. We've worked quite closely over the last 5 or so years with, excuse the pronunciation, but Kaingaora, the Housing Corporation of New Zealand, what it used to be called. And when they were starting to renovate their buildings, they were finding that in the walls, when they removed the plasterboard, they were actually finding mold, extensive mold inside the walls. So this is a classic problem of moisture inside the building, moving through those gaps and cracks and then condensing. And of course, we all know the harm that mold and the toxins that mold can introduce into our house. So these are the sort of issues that can occur if you don't consider that airtightness layer, Sharon.
And you're seeing it in New Zealand homes?
We're seeing it in New Zealand homes. Just last winter, for example, you were talking earlier about the fact that homes are being built much more airtight now. And most certainly we can see that when we were doing blower door tests previously, prior to the latest H1 upgrades, we were finding air tightness of around 5 to 6 air changes per hour in a standard new build. Since these changes, we are seeing results of anywhere between 3 and 4 air changes per hour. And that means that the moisture inside your building is basically being trapped inside there, and there's no way of ventilating it out. So we're a firm believer that, yes, you want to create air tightness, but it's really important to have ventilation. So we would recommend the use of some sort of a mechanical ventilation system, which will basically suck the damp air out of your bathrooms and your kitchens, and it would then bring fresh air from outside and blow that into the living spaces. Now, in order to make this energy efficient, you use a heat exchanger, and that basically takes the energy from the outgoing air and gives it over to the incoming air. And these systems can be really, really energy efficient. You can actually retain up to 95% of the energy while still replacing the air in your building.
I do just want to add on to that from my little architectural technical side and just say there's a difference between being accidentally airtight just by nature of doing the code stuff and being intentionally airtight, because when you're accidentally airtight, which is not what Pro Clima does, you localize the points where you have moisture ingress into your structure, which means you can actually aggravate a mold problem in a smaller area. So the building code doesn't call for ventilation either, a mechanical ventilation other than extract fans in your bathroom and your kitchen, just to let people who don't understand that know. So what Simon is talking about is actually a continuous mechanical ventilation system. That means that we're not relying on opening doors and windows. Our building code just says open up your doors and windows and you'll get enough air, and you'll remove that moisture. So this is about being intentional about ventilation and being intentional about airtightness. So there's a whole industry out there that fights to keep status quo and who just thinks the building codes is the bee's knees and all they have to do. You talk a lot to the people in the industry. What's the feeling that you've got sort of broadly across the industry with this approach to airtightness?
So Sharon, we obviously speak a lot with both architects and builders as well as homeowners, and we over the last 20 years we've spent the majority of our time with architects. That's been our major focus. So when we go and see architects these days, we're finding that most of them are aware of Pro Clima and the air tightness and the benefits of having air tightness and vapor control layers to protect the building envelope. However, they are coming up with the problem of budgeting. So they will definitely suggest this to a customer, but often get pushback when the project's further down the line. When we talk to builders, builders are an area that we haven't had a huge amount of focus on as yet. So we often go and see builders, and many of them feel that this is something over and above the requirement, and they don't see the need for it at all. So it's quite a mix of sort of understanding. And of course, when you get to homeowners, most of them haven't heard about it at all. So it's a real mix of responses.
So it sounds like there's some excuses or stories that you get told
Yes.
about airtightness. So, like, as you say, homeowners might be said, well, this is not required for the building code. Let's take it out for budget. What are some of the stories, or even may I say the word myth bust? What are some of the myths that you've heard? Just to kind of make people aware that we tell ourselves these stories as to why we shouldn't do something because it's not legally required or not status quo. But that doesn't mean to say we actually understand why we should be doing it.
Exactly, Sharon. So it's very interesting you say that. So if you look at sort of the New Zealand culture, it's a really indoor-outdoor flow culture, and people feel that they don't want to have to close the doors and windows and shut everything up. We also get people saying that if they put air tightness in the building, they're going to suffocate. That's a common one. There's a lot of sort of fear of this air tightness thing, a lot of misunderstanding. A lot of people think it's really expensive. So there's a whole mix of different responses from the marketplace. And it's just about educating and slowly just allowing people to understand why this is such a good thing and why you should be considering it.
Well, it's really expensive to repair a rotting building, isn't it? And if it's to the code, which doesn't require airtightness, you actually don't have a legal remedial pathway either. So if you're a homeowner listening to this, you could be creating a massive problem for yourself that's going to cost you a lot more. And of course, our homes are one of our greatest financial investments we make in our lifetime. So Simon and I want you to get it right. So that's all the kind of doom and gloom and myth busting and excuses. But what are some of the success stories that you've had out there with some people and some projects?
We've had some amazing stories, Sharon. So I recently, just last summer, I was over in Raglan and I visited one of my customers there. And he's built himself a reasonably small house. I think it's about 60 to 80 square meters, something around there. But he's had a huge focus both on energy efficiency as well as air tightness and, of course, importantly, ventilation. And we sat down, and you can listen to this on our podcast. The guy's name is Casper, and he talks about what he's done there. So he's created a house using what they call ICF block. It's like a insulated concrete block construction. You have these polystyrene blocks and they fill it up with concrete on the inside. And then he's got an air tightness layer using our Intello system in the ceiling. And we actually sat down in the midsummer last year. I think it was around 26 or 27 degrees outside. And the indoors environment was between 22 and 23 degrees with no air conditioning running. And it was just an amazing feeling to sit down with this blazing heat outside and just feel this comfort. And one of the things I noticed, because as you know, I live in an old house and I'm dependent on air conditioning to keep my comfort going at huge expense. And what I don't like about air conditioning is the feel of that cold blast of air blowing against you. Whereas in his house, it was just this feeling of comfort. You just couldn't feel air blowing at you. It wasn't overheated. It was just a really, really nice, comfortable, and just an amazing environment to be in. And I would really recommend to anyone, if they are interested in experiencing this sort of thing. There are some people around New Zealand that are starting to build sort of Airbnb dwellings and things where you can actually go and spend a night, say in the middle of summer or the middle of winter, to get the best experience and actually go and feel it for yourself. That's what I would recommend to people is, spend the money, to spend a night or two away and actually go and experience it for yourself, because it's very hard to explain it in words. But when you feel it yourself, you'll know what I mean.
Yes, because it's quite intangible, isn't it? We
Yeah.
only know what we have experienced in terms of our history of comfort levels. That's really interesting to go slightly off topic, but that seems that the airtightness and the ventilation is part of a key strategy, not just to reduce winter heating bills, but that actually to reduce overheating in summer. And of course, we're experiencing warmer and warmer summers at the moment. So it's not just a seasonal benefit to the home, it's actually an all year round benefit.
Mm.
Now, you referenced your podcast. I know that Pro Clima and you do a huge amount of work in educating the industry. You run a whole heap of events and workshops. So do you want to just give us an update on what's coming up with the Pro Clima events and maybe your podcast?
Certainly. Thank you, Sharon. So we've got a big event that's coming on in March of this year. We ran this last year and it was hugely popular. This is called the Building Science Summit of New Zealand 2026. And we've got some amazing speakers going to be presenting there. And it'll be held at the International Convention Centre in Auckland on March the 6th. So there is information. If you search Building Science Summit, you'll find the information on Eventbrite. We've also got some training events. So a big part of Pro Clima's goal is to educate people. And the way we do that is with running trainings. So in Auckland, we run a thing called the Certified Installer Training. And that's a really good 2-day course for builders to get hands-on. They come into our building, they do a little bit of theory, but most of it is hands-on with the product, learning from our really experienced and skilled staff. And then if architects are wanting to understand more about designing buildings that are going to be moisture-free, then our WUFI Fundamentals course, which is running on the 16th of April, is another really, really useful resource. WUFI is a tool, once again, from Germany. It's a software modeling tool that is very powerful in the way of understanding the risks of moisture in our construction. The Pro Clima podcast, I've been running this now for about a year and a half. We've just recently published our latest podcast, which features a South African architect by the name of Frederick Stry. And he talks about his journey moving from South Africa to New Zealand, some of the fantastic projects that he's been involved with, and also discusses how he sort of over time understood the movement from sort of the passive solar designs that he was doing many years ago to now the benefits of airtightness and passive house design.
That's fantastic. And just for those of you who are not familiar with Pro Clima and Simon's podcast, you have some pretty important people. You've managed to get and a wide variety of people on that podcast too. So it's definitely worth checking it out. I will put the links for those, as I say, with professional podcasters in the show notes. So if anyone's listening to this and want to hop through to that, you can. So thank you for your time, Simon. I really appreciate it.
Only a pleasure, Sharon. And we've got some fantastic 2 episodes talking with yourself as well on there. So I'm sure people would love to hear your insights.
Oh, yes, please check those ones out. So that's all from me today. I will provide a link too for the Smart Living Spaces website. So if you want to reach out and have a chat to me about building better, you can do that, because I think, Simon, you and I are in agreement on this. We really want to make 2026 the year when we create healthy, comfortable and affordable homes for everyday people instead of just talking about it.